In the top right for Team Liquid, he is uThermal.
And down on the bottom left-hand side of the map, we have the red Protoss player representing Team Raise Your Edge Esports. He is PritDrogo.
Okay, all right. Well, we followed that perfectly fine. Thank you.
Which means you should be well set up for following this epic PvT here.
Yes, well, the PvT is already starting off a little bit interesting with uThermal going for a double gas opener. Certainly not uncommon. It's been maybe 6 months since this, like, well, okay, first of all, there was a moment in TvP where it was proxies all day long. That was a while ago, though. And then it went back to, like, occasionally, and then went to, like, really non-committed ones. And then it went into just, like, 2 base all-ins, and, well, this matchup's had a lot of metas, hasn't it? But anyways, it seemed to be rampant last season, a little less so this season, but people we would expect to continue to factory expand or one base proxy against Protoss. We would expect Marine Lord, and we would expect uThermal.
That is definitely true, and Zombie I think it's going to be very important that Drogo is recognizing the potential of that kind of thing from someone like uThermal, because he hasn't actually scouted at all this game. In fact, it's just kind of okay. To be fair, he did scout around. He scouted for proxies. He scouted for proxies around his third base, like the 2 different locations. Saw nothing, and then just went back home.
That's still a little bit questionable, though, right? Like, theoretically, he could defend this fine with just, you know, the build that he's chosen, producing units and not doing something extremely greedy. But, gosh, I feel like it is just like the problem for most Protosses, even when they know it's on the way, they literally can scout the starport, which actually is about to happen. Look at that. He sees the SCV. He should go check where the SCV was. Yeah, there we go. But even if they know, what I was gonna say is that there's still a lot of chance for this to do damage. Like to just like say I'm going to defend this no matter what. Usually not what happens. But there's the scout. The Hellman's gonna clean this up, then get sucked into the medevac.
Yeah, that's going to be the one weird thing, is that losing an adept this early on is going to kind of sting with the defense capabilities for Drogo, but he has got 2 adepts still back at home. He's moving them over to the main base. He's starting up a shield battery, and he's adding on the Oracle. The Oracle, of course, is going to be immediately here for the defense right as the medevac pops on in. So is this going to be enough? It's going to come down a bit to control, and uThermal realizes, oh, okay, there's a wall on this right-hand side of this bottom side. It's actually pretty difficult to get in there and do the damage.
Yeah, that's a pretty good reaction from both sides, right? Drogo's wall and the shield battery, and then uThermal's immediate pickup. Drogo also now adding on a Phoenix, should be able to clear this out, like, truly and tell you, oh, wait, whoa, more Hellions are suddenly here. That's,
he picked them up from the natural. They were outside the wall.
Yeah, that went from 4 to 6, but it's not actually going to do that much damage. I thought that was going to ensure a lot more probe damage, but still only, what, 4, 5? Okay, 5. That last shot was pretty good, but that should be it. Huh.
Yeah, because the last 2 Hellions, I think they might be able to get 1 more probe. No, the shield battery is going to keep the rest of them alive. And losing the medevac, like you said, is a really big deal here, because if you're able to somehow keep the medevac alive or something, like you killed a few workers, you kind of even things up a little. You lose the medevac and your starport's proxied. You even built a tech lab at that starport. Like, this is pretty committed from uThermal.
Well, the clever thing about this is that the Oracle could have been using all of its energy to kill, and now it can't detect. So you're kind of ensuring some probe damage. The problem with this is that it's scouted, 1, so that would cause another Oracle to pop out, and that 2, a shield battery is prepared. So 1 Banshee actually won't be finding a lot of damage. Well, take that back, you just go into the natural. Wouldn't have found damage in the main. Should have finished my sentence.
That is very true. Yeah, you're right. The shield battery will completely prevent damage in the main base. And finally, the Oracle's going to return back, and there's the revelation. Tags it. 6 workers, you know, given how scouted that was, that's not bad. I actually think that Drogo may have thought that the Banshee had not popped yet. Right. So he sent all of his units over to the starport and was like, I'm just going to camp this out for when the first Banshee pops. And then he realized, as the Banshee walks over his pylon, I was like, oh no.
I think you're exactly right about that. I mean, as much as we like to say that the pros know literally everything timing-wise, it's definitely not true. You're just looking at a bit of guesswork, so. That is already, I think, enough damage, and then I'm basically banking on the next Banshee to actually get something done too. If that was it, if this next Banshee dies, I think it's like, okay, but I think this will get something done. It's certainly doing something as in keeping the Phoenixes still at home and cautious. Funnily enough, it's going to be found by the Stalkers, but it can just cloak.
Oh, did Drogo actually notice it? Okay, yeah, he's pulling back his Phoenix and his Oracle, so should be able to get back there in time, and that shield battery in the natural is actually finished this time, and with one in the natural and the main base, his Banshee should not be able to get anything done outside of some scouting information. Just confirming that there's still more Phoenix being made, which is not a massive surprise.
Well, I mean, that's still pretty nice. I mean, the Banshee did keep the units at home again. You know, they're finally going to move across the map, and they decided not to. But that is one of those, like, well, okay, it's like 2 Banshees and Cloak doing only 6 probes of the damage. Okay, let's see. Well, considering that uThermal's follow-up is pretty swift, already finds a Phoenix, as Drogo didn't realize this was happening. Overall, the Banshees were still worth it just with the amount of distraction that they were able to give Drogo. Cyclone's going to get 2 lock-ons, and nope, not quite going to finish them off, but they're still alive, and now covered by a lot of Marines.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that Drogo can actually defend this 3rd base, and I think that uThermal agrees. He's just target firing right down, and especially with the Cyclone lock-ons, once those start getting involved, I think that, yeah, that 3rd base is going to go down without too much of a fight. And the funny thing is, yeah, uThermal didn't really lose a whole lot for that 3rd base either. So he has the choice now. Do I continue with the attack or do I just back off? Stim and combat shields just finished up, so I wouldn't hate if you continue to just stick around and poke around, but there's definitely a dangerous period when the next power units are going to start popping out here for Drogo.
I feel like this build order has actually gone, it's not perfect because they didn't just win the game with the Hellions. I guess that would have been perfect. But as far as like the execution of each individual step, I feel like it's really compounded together, you know? The Hellions didn't do much, but that's okay. And the Banshees did a decent amount, and that's okay. It's almost like Showtime and his Adepts and his Disruptors, all right? The final push still just wins the game. Oh, Lord. That's kind of what it feels like. But actually, 13 SCVs going down is finally some serious damage that Drogo was missing, having these units just constantly defend.
There's only Marauders here now. The one last Marine gets picked up. Oh my God, Zondergrove.
So awkward.
He's actually just camping production with 3 Phoenix and an Oracle. This is insane.
You know what? It's because I was talking about how beautiful uThermal's game was. That's my bad.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you have to cast a cursor to even it up. Give Drogo that fighting chance, because that pulled uThermal's entire army, by the way, back, which means that this 3rd base is now nearly completed. Drogo has killed a lot of workers, taking the economic advantage again, and actually has Colossus now. This is not going to be the same situation as before, where uThermal just goes across the map and there's no power units. Like, there are the power units there now.
It's so funny though, Fear Dragon, because like I was gonna say how bad of the game this was for Drogo when everything was considered. Like the 3rd Nexus down, almost even on workers. His Phoenix weren't able to do very much. Now that uThermal has lost SCVs, I actually think that it looks more like a normal game. But one where I guess, again, uThermal is getting into the main base. Adepts, surprisingly, being the one thing to respond. Charge is not done, so those Zealots are barely helping. A Guardian Shield plus a Shield Battery might be able to save the day for the Colossus, but only be temporarily. One goes down, the second one's going to be targeted. There's a Shield Battery, but it's too late! Oh my God, he just won, didn't he?
Zondergrove, you actually just cursed this game like 3 times over.
Yeah,
there's no other explanation.
We got the sick predictions.
Wow, that's amazing.
This game, though.
There it is. GG. uThermal brings that game back with a killer drop. Look at that smile on that young lad's face. For him, but regardless, guys, he's going to be up 1-0 against this fellow up here in the top left-hand side of the map, the red Protoss player from Raise Your Edge Esports. He is PritDrogo.
In the bottom right, as the blue Terran for Team Liquid, he is a uThermal. And it is going to be more of a normal game. So that's a nice confirmation. Still doesn't... There could be a proxy starport even off of 2 bases. That's still a threat. And it could be still something kind of odd, because that is what uThermal is known for. He's either playing really, really great, and his kind of cheesier or weirder openings just further increase his lead and how fast he can kill his opponent, or his kind of scrappy and odd play style just gives him that early victory that can kick off a game. Well, like last game where it was just really hard to call. It's quite back and forth. So I still think of him as someone who's going to do something a little bit different. But so far, just a factory after the expansion, so normal.
Yeah, you know, now that you bring that up, it actually does remind me, like, the perception I have of both these players is that they both are willing to go a bit off the beaten path. In terms, they'll of course still play some of the standard styles and stuff, but it's kind of uThermal will go for the more outwardly, like, very obviously different styles. You know, he's the player who will, like, mix and mech and do kind of really weird proxies and shenanigans like you were talking about. I feel like Drogo has like the subtle changes. He'll do things like he'll get out a Dark Templar by cutting workers or something like 10, 15 seconds earlier, or do these small adjustments that kind of abuse opponents who are like, this is what a standard thing looks like, you're doing a standard thing, and oh, wait a second, you're here 10 seconds early, what's going on? So it's kind of cool to see like different ways to play different from both players.
Yeah, and as much as I was talking up uThermal scrappiness, I mean, Drogo, I think it was either last season or season before, he had kind of that epic comeback against like Showtime, right, in the PvP. Where it was like he seemed like he was not only dead down by 2 games, but also dead in the 3rd game, and was able to bring it back. So these guys actually just have some similar qualities that can usually create fun games. And whilst the last game didn't last incredibly long, it certainly was fun. So I can only hope this one does the same. Drogo is going to try and do some scouting after a little bit of back and forth on the micro that basically resulted in the same, type of TvP would expect. 2 adepts guarding, wall off at the front. uThermal actually swapping off to a tech lab for that starport. Is going to try a Banshee again. Okay, this could be a big surprise. So Drogo not going for a Stargate means he would never scout this, unless he went for, not that never scout it, but he wouldn't scout it very quickly, I should say. Unless he went for like a century after these adepts. So it's going to be that observer. Hopefully that observer. Hopefully uThermal doesn't see it and scan and kill it.
Oh yeah, that would definitely be a nightmare scenario there, because time of the Robo, you usually do want to actually spend not just purely making observers, you want to make some of the other units, but he is actually going to go for a second observer as well, which is actually going to cover his bases, both figuratively and literally in this case, where he's going to be able to both go for a bit of a scout and also have an observer back at home. The pair with the Blink Stalkers should help him defend against any kind of Banshee harass.
He's going for a 2-base setup as well. He's got all 4 of his gases, so it is going to be Blink into Colossus, which means that, he could have maybe gone for a faster 3rd, actually cut some corners, maybe gotten a later Robo and thus a later Observer, and would have been in more trouble. But with his setup, clearly saying, I'm going to macro, I want to play out the longer game, seems like he would always have been okay against Banshees. There's the jeez, Louise. Okay.
Doesn't actually even get the scout on the tech lab, but seeing a Banshee is a good sign that there's Banshees.
Yeah, and he did make that second observer, right? So now the trouble is just kind of the classic trouble against the Banshees. Can the Stalkers actually be in the right place at the right time?
Yeah, and what's especially annoying is the observer, that one extra observer that was made in the right place at the right time, because that Robo Bay finished up. You don't actually want to have to make another observer right now. You're going to go for the Colossus. And that actually does mean that one observer really has to be careful where it is placed. He might even just kind of stick it on the Banshee for now.
The other downside of losing the observer like he did is that he doesn't see a move out. And I'm not sure he's going to be prepared for this. I mean, you made an excellent point about not wanting to spend time building observers. It's going to be crucial that he has this Colossus that he's chronering right now. But he just doesn't know about it. He's going to have units defending Banshees, which is one of their nastier, sneakier attributes, is that they're just distractions. And these units over on the 3rd are not very well protected.
Yeah, that one Colossus going to be getting a lot of damage on the Stalkers. Going forward aggressively to snipe off these siege tanks. And my God, it looks like this is actually going to work out very, very well overall. It looks like for Drogo, just because he's able to actually crush this attack. Even though he loses a lot of Stalkers, keeps the Colossus alive and the base.
If he didn't pull the trigger on that blink, it's like one shot, then you blink is such a big difference. But he was able to do that. I was like, well, he's got no shield batteries, so this is going to be tough. Turns out he didn't need shield batteries. He was fine. Takes the Colossus, although it does take damage, does lose some Stalkers, but I don't think uThermal was too happy about that. He really wanted to be more of a surprise. He wanted to get situated.
I really actually thought when we saw uThermal kind of getting set up and everything, I was surprised that he actually moved out exactly when he did, and I thought he was going to move out maybe like 30 seconds later. Just because the Raven over here is what I'm used to actually seeing with those kind of attacks and push-ins, especially since, you could see there was one Colossus out at the time. I think by the time the Raven comes out, you can kind of see it would have gotten there when the second Colossus had just popped, but it has enough for interference matrix for both of them. Was that just hitting a bit like uThermal trying to hit earlier than expected, or was that just like totally not the push out he was going for?
I think there's usually you would push out the time that he did, but the idea is that it usually lasts a bit longer. Like maybe it does get cleaned up faster than the Raven appears, but it usually doesn't get cleared up that fast, which is why I think that we saw like on his camera, like he just wasn't happy with how that went down. So ideally you do the push and then the Raven joins up later, and then it's even more of a desperate hold because interference mages has come. But it wasn't uncommon for what uThermal did. It was uncommon with how fast it was cleaned up. Now his Raven is designated to just auto-turret harassment. His Banshee also going to go down, so that really is just the Raven able to poke and prod.
Yeah, that Raven at least staying alive. It doesn't have to worry about Phoenix or anything else picking it off in the dead airspace, so it could stick around there, throw down some auto-turrets later, and maybe even just escape back home to get some interference matrices off for an actual fight later on. But we are starting to see second Robo being thrown down, as well as the transition to Disruptors. So Drogo is going to start rounding out his army, even adding on a couple of his High Templar, even though he doesn't have Storm or anything being researched just yet. But this is definitely getting into the later stages of PvT at this point.
And uThermal seems like he's going to prepare for it. I mean, he has to take the threat of the Colossus technology really seriously. So he just built bunkers. But we know there's not going to be a push out. uThermal has really lost vision and momentum in the game, so he doesn't know that. Even if his Raven scouted the double forge, it doesn't actually, I think, stop someone with Colossus to start posturing, which we've seen some other Protoss players more apt to do. But Drogo actually just stays at home, and he's going to go right into 2-2, and with Chronos, he will eventually get faster upgrades than uThermal. And then add on those Disruptors, which the Vikings, they don't hard counter. There's not really a hard counter to Disruptors. So, yeah. Not actually the game uThermal. uThermal is preparing for an attack, but I think we're actually having quite a passive game. He's just playing it safe. He's playing it like Soul would play it.
Yeah, I like the way you put that, actually. Stalker is going to be a really nice vision on this bottom left-hand side, which ironically is the side that uThermal goes to, even though there's actually no coverage on the north or the top right-hand side. But PritDrogo is going to have a nice opportunity to try and snag a kill on that medevac if he positions a couple more Stalkers around that area. But just that one Stalker giving chase to it for now.
It's a lot of dead space, so Stalkers ain't able to get this one.
That is true.
Yeah. One of my drops, with the armory, very annoying to clean up. I don't think he's going to go like, cure Would of Mine drop heavy, but just something to be out in the map. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually asked or watched Soul's games and has kind of incorporated that into his build order notebook. Nice feedback. But rather style notebook, if you want to call it. As this might be I think it's already a big difference what uThermal is known for, but it's also kind of a position that he was forced into anyways, because his early and mid game really didn't work out too well.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning, kind of along the lines of what you were saying, that uThermal, he is the player that I feel like when I see the best of uThermal, like if I was to create a YouTube highlight reel of uThermal's games, it wouldn't actually usually be the games that he's doing these big, long macro plays or anything. It's actually usually when the games are a lot of trades between the players, it becomes really scrappy and everything. I think those are the games that uThermal excels at, and this has just really not been that. So, I don't know. I think uThermal's still a capable player playing a more normal macro game and stuff, but it'll be interesting to see how things pan out from here.
This isn't the worst timing for a defense. I mean, Drogo was actually hitting into 2-2. He didn't know it, but maybe he could have attacked a bit sooner. Disruptors are going to find Terran armies corralled, which is usually an ideal situation for them, but Disruptors aren't really getting any good hits, even as they threatened it. And Drogo is going to say, like, all right, I guess I can't break him. Yeah, I think that... Oh, this actually might turn around. Ooh, going for rounds. A big fold there.
The army's not coming in from the south side, but I think that Drogo was actually anticipating the army coming in from the south. He does go for some disruptor shots to zone out that south side army. Starts throwing out some more disruptor shots. Reinforcements are finally coming forward, and pretty decent disruptor hits over there. Even though this army has been EMP'd to all hell, and the last Colossus is going to end up falling. Is Drogo going to actually have enough over here? The anti-armor missile's doing so much for him.
Dude, the Warp Prism went down before the Zealots actually warped in. Those Zealots maybe save a couple of the Disruptors. It turns out uThermal does take the better fight, but that was kind of an odd fight on both sides, right? It looked like Drogo was actually using this choke that we see right now pretty effectively, but then a couple Would of Mines actually connected, and then the EMP connected as well. I mean, uThermal, I thought, was being over-eager, but apparently he did just fine. But on the other hand, Drogo does still have a 5th base up. He still has enough bank. He was starting to accrue a bank right there to go and rebuild his army. And the game certainly is not over, but maybe Drogo a little more hesitant on any future attacks.
Yeah, the Colossus count did get reset, but I mean, it's actually worth noting that so did the Viking count, as they just kind of flew straight over the army of Drogo trying to get involved in the fight. But uThermal is going to start making a little bit of push harassment on this right-hand side, which again, I'll note, there's not as much vision for Drogo. He has a few little spotters there, like a Zealot on the top right-hand side at either base, but this little push, this little drop, circumvents both of those Zealots, dives on in over here, kills the shield battery, kills the cannon. The army is very far out of position, so at least a couple of probes are going to go down, but with some sim, if he decides to commit to that, he probably could have gotten it weak, but not actually kill that base.
uThermal's going to have actually scans aplenty since he doesn't necessarily have to mule anymore, and he's also been building extra bases. That fourth finish is a planetary as well. Like, Drogo really was so close to hitting a perfect timing. He could have hit before the 2-2, but not, his 2-2 wasn't actually that far ahead, so it's like kind of questionable in that. But he could have hit before the planetary was done, and it actually didn't. But that wasn't just a planetary forming. That was also a fifth orbital that he had just left at his natural, and now he's just building more command centers, really digging into embracing late game TvP, which many Terrans don't. I mean, you brought it up with, like, if you're going to create a highlight reel, yeah, you would think of like aggression, and immediately what I think of is uThermal getting huge concaves against disruptors, but taking the engagement and then being like, I can do this. And honestly, sometimes failing. But this game, he was like, I can do this. And as opposed to just like saying, oh, I won, actually pulls back, he actually plays defensive. And I think that was the right call. Perhaps we're seeing a calmer, more patient uThermal today.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of those sensor towers are going to actually make it difficult for Drogo to move in from multiple sides without being detected. And look at that. We already see that uThermal's detected that there are 2 attacks. So he splits up his army, a lot of it heading over to this bottom left-hand side a bit later, but he catches the army before it makes its way down the choke point, is able to deny it from moving forward. The Stalkers have to blink out of there. So not the worst of trades for Drogo on that right-hand side, but gets deflected.
And again, that was like as uThermal's 3-3 was finishing, so no upgrade lead for him. Another upgrade that we need to talk about is that uThermal has +2 ship weapons as well as Liberator range, and while we haven't had Liberators yet, we will have them now. Defensively, fantastic. Harassment-wise, they're also fantastic. And Drogo, well, I guess now he is trying to prep against that, getting a fleet beacon. Could see supreme late-game TvP in this game.
Absolutely. This is definitely getting to that stage of the game where it's going to get very, very dicey. And remember again that both these players are just a quick reminder of how important this match is for both of these players, and potentially determining whether you advance out of the group or get knocked out or get top 2. Oh, that disruptor hit is going to be everything that Drogo wanted. He is immediately going to send his army to this angle as both deny uThermal from pushing further forward, but also potentially try and punish him. Might be able to catch a couple of the ghosts on the later end of things. uThermal turns around, saves his ghosts from the Zealots that are charging a little too far forward, and with a Liberator setting up, I don't know that Drogo wants to engage into that. Yeah.
Not through that choke. With an EMP as well, his army would have been decimated. He's going to reposition, try and go up this choke, which is usually very difficult to do against Liberators, but he just barely skirts around it. Not really. Now he's stuck. He's going to take some damage, but getting at least a couple of disruptor shots in there and trying to find an angle of attack. He's so close to it, but even a drop starting to distract Drogo as well. 2 disruptor shots not going to do very much. I think that's actually most of the disruptors he has, so he has to be. Oh no, he has one. Whoa, he has many more. Just kidding. I saw 3. There's like 6 there. All right, so he's finally going to find an angle and at least get a command center.
Yeah, ironically, there are 3 command centers over here, so there's actually quite a few he's going to have to work his way through. I'm a little bit worried about the Colossus, all being on the very far back side where this attack is actually going to be coming in from. But these disruptor shots going to zone out that army of uThermal. Another command center dies. The planetary fortress is holding, but for how much longer with more disruptor shots coming on out? uThermal is actually fighting the Warp Prism and the Stalkers on the north side, but he does end up losing the base on the south.
You know, I don't think he was repairing that planetary. Not that it would have made like it hold, but he might have been able to take out a couple more units. And I think it was the decision that he was making. He said, I'm going to go after the units that are more vulnerable and hope the planetary buys a little more time. So now I can situate in this position exactly what he was hoping for. All the disruptors going out and not hitting very much, and aggressive blink forward. But those are Liberators. All of the disruptors get taken down. More reinforcements are coming through, and Drogo's supply has plummeted.
My God, uThermal finds the perfect angle, the perfect surround. We were talking about this. This is one of the games for that highlight reel. uThermal focus fires down the pylon, denies the warp in. Drogo on an all-out retreat, and uThermal up over 80 supply at this point, taking out one of the very, very important remaining bases here for Drogo. I think Drogo is just letting it settle in since uThermal's already up 1-0, but my God, What a play. Zombie Grub, I was a little skeptical. I was a little afraid there for uThermal, but he absolutely made it work.
I mean, that was tactics right there. I mean, maybe it was also maybe a bit of luck if we're being real, but I think he really did just say, like, you know what? That's a weak gateway army. I can take out his reinforcements as well. So at least, at the very least, I'm cutting his momentum. And then he was like, oh, I also just have a position. Let's abuse it. If Drogo had, I guess, known it would get that bad, he might have recalled instead, right? And then just taken the engagement after losing a Nexus, which is better than what has happened, and it's him losing the game. But that just happened all in like the blink of an eye almost. Like, you can't really blame Drogo for getting out position there because it was such a weird engagement. There was multiple engagements that led to that scenario.
Yeah, wow, it's really, really well done. It's worth noting again, like Drogo was sitting 3-3 in the group. This is going to bring him to a 3-4 score, which is already worse than all of the other top 4 players. So it is, I think, actually impossible for Drogo to make it out after losing this, which is why he's going to stick it out, even being down so much, make some of the Dark Templar, and try and make what you can work. Unfortunately, with so many scans still available there for uThermal, he's going to be able to take out all those DTs, take out a base, and well, he might lose a little bit on the other side of the map. But you know what? I don't hate the ambition here for Drogo to try and make something happen.
Yeah, now there's the tap outs though. That is going to be it. uThermal with the 2-0 looking a lot stronger than we anticipated. I mean, exactly the